and then I'll share my screen here. So there we go. So everyone, as it is 3 o'clock, or sorry, 1 o'clock here, let's start. And we'll just have other people join whenever they come online. And the important thing is we'll record this anyway and make it available later. So let's talk about Serenissimus. It's a theme where, you know, I think we have to have a large amount of application of the principle of disbelief, because it's kind of a theme which is pretty advanced in some ways, just because of the anonymity factor and the fact that it's the Serenissimuses don't necessarily, you know, openly walk around the streets and we all know who they are and where they are and stuff. And because of the nature of, you know, the hierarchy of evolution, so it's good to bear in mind to keep a real level head about all these things. And so how did this all come about? So what happened was, and for those who don't know me, you know, my name is Jeff Lloyd, and this is more for people who are seeing the video later on. I'm an independent researcher, and I work with a couple of non-profit organizations, principally with Isaac and also with Conscious, which does conscientiometry, or, you know, talks about evaluating consciousnesses. So let's move ahead and see what we want to do today. So we're going to talk and have a debate and then move energies and de-assimilate at the end. But we're going to talk about evocation of the Serenissimus. So I'm going to present some ortho-thoughts or ortho-pensatas and other ideas related to Serenism. So Homo sapiens Serenissimus, as you know, and I'll just record here for posterity's sake, they are consciousnesses like us, still having physical lives, but they're more evolved and more developed. They have reached sort of human potentials that we haven't yet discovered, conquered, manifested. We're not manifesting them in ourselves yet. So these consciousnesses, they are able to do things with parapsychism, with bioenergies, at a level which it's hard for us to comprehend and for us to manage, but they manifest in this condition in a full-time kind of a manner. And they help sort of stabilize to the point possible without performing any evolutionary rape. They help to stabilize and harmonize the holothosene, or the energetic environment that we have here on Earth. So we want to evoke the Serenissimus, and so they have a very refined thocenity. And so we want to try to refine our own thocenity so we can connect more with the holothosene of the Serenissimus. So the holothosene, we could say the vibe, the energetic pattern, the way they are. And when I talk about thocenity, I'm talking about those units of manifestation of the consciousness. This is a theory proposed by Vieira, which shows the three things which are indisputably and inextricably linked, namely our thoughts, our emotions, our sentiments, and our energy. So the thosene is spelled T-H-O-S-E-N-E, and it's my neologism. It's a new word made up of those three components: thoughts, sentiments, and energy. And so we produce these thocenes all the time. Then I want to go down to, quickly as possible, the personal experience I had in relation to this. And those personal experiences, actually, there was a couple of main ones, but they continue to this day. For example, I woke up this morning and felt a really strong connection with this presentation, with the Serenissimus involved, and with the things. And so these experiences continue. And they often entail energetic showers, okay, which makes it a really pleasant kind of experience and evocation to make. So already, just to share with you guys, you know, like, if you refine the thocenity, you start to be able to connect with these consciousnesses in a deeper way, and that is a really enlightening and beneficial thing to be able to do. And hence, then we want to talk about how can we study the Homo sapiens Serenissimus. I should say that this has been presented under the Bridge, which is an Isaac project that we run in partnership with CIAC, a research institution here in Brazil, and also Rio Prendentia, which is another non-profit research institution and educational institution here in Cognopolis in Brazil. So, hello Regina, nice to see you there, and Christoph, welcome to the show. And it's really an invitation to think big. Okay, this is a phrase that is often said in conscientiology circles, and it's a challenge for us all, and it's a challenge for us to do day to day, all the time. The physical dimension tends to swallow our perceptions, diminish our parapsychism, diminish the number of insights we can have. And so our challenge is to counteract that by intentionally trying to look for bigger ideas and implement bigger ideas where we can become more creative, less repressed, and less restricted in our condition here. So this is the invitation for this this lecture, is to think big. So let's try and do that for the next hour and a half to 2 hours of the talk. So these are the steps we're going to work on now: the evocation of Serenism and the refinement of our Thocenity. And we're going to do that through some orthopensatas. So ortho-thoughts or orthopensatas, these are works, ideas captured and written and presented and recorded by Dr. Waldo Vieira. The book of 2 volumes was published in 2014, and there's going to be a 3-volume version published probably this year. They're just looking to get more people pre-ordering it. Once we get to 200, I believe that's the point they're going to publish the 3-volume work. And it's up to like 115 people around that level now, so we're getting there. So let's have a look at these and read these. The first one: an improvement in the intraphysical holothosene occurs where the Serenissimus being is reborn, frequently even before their resoma. So, you know, we know that we exist before we are reborn. You can have your own personal experience of that, so don't believe anything I'm saying, but have your own personal experience of that. And this reurbanization, this improving of the quality of the holothosene, we can see in a number of ways. And when I get to these personal experiences, I'll show you some of the interesting things around the region where we identified this Serenissimus in Australia. So I phrase it like indications of a Serenissimus, but for me, I've already had enough experiences that I'm very confident that there is a Serenissimus in this region in Australia that hadn't been previously spoken about. You know, we know that Dr. Vieira mentioned in 700 Experiments, which is now available in English on Amazon, a list of Serenissimus which he had identified in different continents around the world. And so this is one that isn't in that list, and I hadn't heard it being referred to by anyone else. And so it's kind of a new discovery, so to say. And it shows that, you know, it's not just Dr. Vieira who had those insights, but we also can have those things, right? Dr. Vieira was just one of us as well, of course. But, you know, he managed to capture lots of things which we're still working out how to do. And so the point we're trying to do with this presentation is help us to tune in more and actually understand how can we try to study the Serenissimus. As this next ortho-thought mentions, if a person studies the structure of human serenity, it changes their own life for the better. And I'm just starting to study serenity, right? I had these experiences a couple of years ago, and I just kept very quiet about it because it was a sort of I didn't really know what to do with it. I didn't really know how to manage it. And also it's a kind of thing that some people can get jealous about and so on. So I just sort of kept pretty quiet. But I'm starting to see that, yeah, really when we connect with the Serenissimus more, which we are all free to do at any time, it really helps our own level of Thocenity and our structure and outside ourselves. Now, I've got a colleague here helping me in the room, and so if you guys have questions, please just stick up your hand or jump in, or you can send them via the chat, and we'll get to answering those questions, okay? We're going to have a question time more at the end, but really feel free at any time, please. So, many pre-Serenissimi, men and women, already present indications of serenology. However, they do not have self-awareness of this evolutionary condition. This is shocking, right? So we are, all of us, pre-Serenissimi, at least to the best of my knowledge, and we have indications of serenology, but we don't have any awareness of the condition, which is at the same time embarrassing, a little bit, you know, something that also should motivate us to actually try to identify in ourselves indications of this evolutionary condition, the serenology, the Serenissimus. We all have really good traits. I know each of you, at least superficially, or in some cases more deeply, and we all have some of these characteristics in us. If we study the conscientiogram more, which is something we do in Conscious there, it really starts to give you insights. For some of the questions and items in that book, the 2,000 items, you can give yourself a mark of 10, like 10 out of 10, like 100%, which is equal to a Serenissimus on that particular question. That's not to say you're a Serenissimus, but it is to say that you have some attributes, characteristics, abilities, and so on, which in that particular aspect of manifestation, you score the same mark as a Serenissimus. So it's worth making this thing, bringing this reality closer to us, I guess is what we're trying to cover here. The foundation of Serenology is based on the self-confidence and assistentiality of the consciousness. So your level of self-confidence and the level which actually being more assistential gives us more self-confidence, right? There's a really nice synergy between that thing as well, between these two points of this binomial. And so to build on the Serenology, right, we can focus on these things. So many people have difficulties with self-esteem. This is something that is in your hand entirely to change. I was in that condition, I had that, and I don't feel like that anymore. Some days I have bigger challenges than others, but we should have a much greater degree of self-confidence. And there's that old saying in Conscientiology, we say don't think bad about anyone, and sometimes we forget that you are included in that anyone, right? So it's don't think bad about anyone, but also don't think bad about yourself. Be critical, be objective, try to analyze and reflect, and not be self-corrupt. But that doesn't mean we have to be negative, pessimistic, self-intruding in relation to ourselves. Now, the last one here on this page, one day Serenissimi beings will appear publicly just like the stars, and these are the stars in the cosmos, not the movie stars from Hollywood or Bollywood or wherever you are, leaving the darkness of evolutionary anonymity. So what I feel is that this experience, which I had, which I'm going to get to talking about soon, is a indication from the Serenissimi, from the maxi mechanism, the evolutionary scale that exists in our universe. It's an indication that the Serenissimus are starting to make themselves a little more public. And I can say something in relation to this because I had doubts about presenting this in public and, like talking about it. But I did it in Portuguese a month or two ago, and the night after I presented it, so the same night I presented it at night, then I went home, relaxed, and went to sleep. The night after I presented it, I woke up, and sometimes I have inspirations through music. So the music, the song that is in my head, sometimes has really profound meanings. Sometimes, not always, right? We have to be critical sometimes, and sometimes it's not always easy to interpret those things as well. But anyway, and the music that was in my head was the Roy Orbison song, which is anything you want, you've got it. And I was like, what I connected was that the presentation I did in Portuguese was okay, and the Serenissimi and the maxi mechanism involved said, okay, so what can we help you? What is it? It's like a little good work, what can we give you in return? And so I asked for something, and then I went back to sleep, and then within a day, the question I had, the thing I was trying to get more information about, I had the answer. And it wasn't something small, it was kind of a big thing, but it was actually in relation to my OFEX, and it answered and settled a lot of things in me, but that's probably a thing for another day. But just to confirm more to the degree that I can this last ortho thought, which talks about this Serenissimus starting to become a little bit more public, which I think is great. How are they going to do that exactly, and what role we all can play in that, let's try to work out as we can go forward. But let's see. Another couple of ones here. A Serenissimus being breaks their anonymity when they are interested in performing more ample clarification. Intermissivists already possess insinuations or glimpses of Serenism. How about you assume this condition, starting to research it? So this is again an invitation for us to start to connect more with this condition. Remember, for example, the next step in our evolutionary progression is this thing of intrusion freeness, being permanently free, permanent free, or desperto, permanently and totally intrusion free. So the first thing to try to engage with that, though, is to assume that condition. Another step closer even to our reality, penta, the personal energetic task, the daily commitment to work with energy. You've got to assume that condition to start to engage, to start to get into the thing. So it's another challenge that we can assume. And when we assume those things, consequences flow just naturally as a result of that. And here we are, I'm going to read the last point here. A Serenissimus being always acts in resonance with the flows and reflows of the cosmos, knowing how to employ the immanent energies. That's the key thing for me. Like, they're connected at a high level with the thing. They know how to employ immanent energies. Ask ourselves the question, to what degree am I able to employ immanent energies and manage my own energies? This is something for us to think about. We're nearly at the end of these, guys. Don't panic. I'm not going to go on for much longer. I'm not even sure if you're panicking. You're probably not. Maybe even very serene. Let's see. Which more evolved ideas sprout in your consciential micro-universe? Have you already thought that there could be the finger of the Serenissimus being there? Every intermissivist had some contact, even if fleeting, with some Serenissimus being. So during our intermission, the period before we were reborn into this life, we had some contact. So why can't we recuperate that rapport, that affinity, and deepen it? So just up to us. It's possible. When a Conscientiology Experiments risomas, it's as if the sky were transformed into an ocean. And I include this one because there's a picture, a beautiful picture that I can show later of the region, which sort of connects with this idea. And as I was saying, but I want to leave it here physically visible, don't believe in anything. Experiment, have your own experiences. This is the central philosophy of Conscientiology. It's the principle of disbelief is the reference we give it. And this is the key thing, particularly when we're talking about something which seems so far away, so abstract, or so theoretical. The challenge is to make it less and less theoretical, less and less distance, but maintain your questioning. So you've got to have an open mind, but you've also got to try to continue to question as much as you can these things. So the personal experience, how did it play out? There's a few people in the past who used to ask me, and it was kind of more of, I don't know if they were, I think they were joking, but it's a kind of a question where, like, it's impossible to answer. So I just sort of thought, well, that's a really silly question. And I thought the person was just trying to be clever or smart by asking the question. But I said, well, where's the Serenissimus in Australia? And I just was like, shrugged my shoulders and said, I've got no idea. Don't even know if there is one. And but the question stuck in my mind for time, you know, and it took a fair while, some years. You know, I lived in Australia earlier on in my life, but more recently from 2012 from 2004 to 2012. And since 2012, I've been here in Brazil in Cognopolis. So it took a while, but now I've got an answer, and the answer is Hervey Bay. Hervey Bay. Oh, okay. And so people go, where? What? What's this? So Hervey Bay is located here in Australia. It's about 4 hours north of Brisbane, which is about I think it's the third or fourth largest city. It's one of the biggest cities in Australia. And you can see up here off to the edge, right, there's a bunch of smaller islands. Papua New Guinea, over here is New Zealand, which is where I was born, down here in the south. And you can see here's the Coral Sea. and I'm going to talk about this more later when we try to get into some theories associated with why is Serenissimus here. And then we have Indonesia, Singapore, and then above that you've got all of Asia. So zooming in on, and in one place zooming out and looking at the tectonic plates in the top right, but here's what Hervey Bay looks like, and it's an interesting area. This entire island here, this green island called Fraser Island, it's entirely sand. So it's the largest sand island in the world, and there's even little lakes on the island and so on. And then starting up over here, you can start to see the Great Barrier Reef starts to form and appear, and it goes for about 2,300 kilometers up the coast of northern Australia. And this is what the area looks like. Roughly Hervey Bay, sort of this area here. There's a few other suburbs and areas here, but this is the region where the experiences I'm about to share with you happened. And I included the things with the tectonic plates because Dr. Vieira had the theory that Serenissimus was more connected with a particular tectonic plate on the Earth. And if that's the case, then it would seem that this Serenissimus is, at least one of the Serenissimus is associated with the Indo-Australian plate. So why Hervey Bay? What made me talk about this and present this? And it was shocking to me when I had this experience as well, so I'm anticipating it can be shocking to other people when they hear this thing. So to speak based on my own personal experiences, which is the challenge we present with the principle of disbelief, and I'm going to explain. On January the 23rd in 2016 in Australia, I had a plane trip, a free plane trip for a weekend, well, somewhere in Australia, and I could choose where I wanted to go. I had a boarding pass, and it was on row 24, I think it was, and was boarding the flight. And then this is one kind of odd happening. It happens more in some countries than others, but in Australia it's really rare. So I was seated. I was supposed to be seated, and I was getting my boarding pass scanned. And at the last minute, there was a beep, and the system went, and the lady went, "Oh, what happened?" And then she goes, "Oh, your seat's changed. You're now in row 13." And that, as I said, it's unusual. But what it reminded me of is Dr. Vieira talking about the number 13, and the number 13 in particular when he was traveling. When he was traveling and he started to see 13 appearing everywhere, numbers and gates and stuff, for him it was a signal that everything was going really well. So I was like, okay, I remembered that at the time. I went, interesting. And just one other note, the number here, the time of arrival was 11:15 in the morning, and the more ones we have in things, particularly number 11, is also another thing which Dr. Vieira talks about in relation to parapsychism and intellectuality and these attributes. But anyway, also, so I got moved to a different seat, and I was seated next to an exchange student from southern Germany, which also made me think of the reurbanizer, a Serenissimus. And then we arrived in this town, Hervey Bay, which was the place I'd chosen to fly to. And I sort of was just tried to scan a little bit when I was choosing where I was going to fly. And I said, oh, I'll try there. I had tried another place earlier on in another years ago. And it was interesting, but it wasn't an exact as good a fit as this one was in terms of trying to locate the Serenissimus. And anyway, I arrived in the place, and it was really weird. Sometimes in English, people just call you love. Some countries, some places, it's more common than others. And so I arrived at the airport, and I was collecting the car from the car rental guy, and he said, can I help you, love? And it's unusual for a man in a small Australian town to call another man love. But it was like the fraternity, you could say the level of fraternity, the level of care which people felt for one another seemed to be really high. And it was, I was in the other shop getting lunch, and the lady goes, "Oh, hello, love, da-da-da." So everything was love, and everything was really calm. The energies were really great. And there was a light, warm breeze blowing, which is another name for a zephyr, right? Which is Dr. Vieira's name in the extra physical dimension. So I had a really nice lunch, and then I went for a big walk along this jetty. There's a 600-meter long jetty that goes out into the ocean, beautiful breeze, really lovely, and just relaxing and pleasant. And then I decided, okay, and here's an image of the jetty and the, the clouds and the ocean and so on there. This is at low tide. And so I did all that. I said, okay, time to go and check into the hotel. And I was on the one side, you've got the ocean, and then you're just driving along the main road, heading towards the hotel, or I was. And I just passed one intersection, one road, and the idea came into my mind really clearly. So a little bit of parapsychism, intuition, take the next left. So I took the next left, and obviously I was a little bit curious, and my expectations were raised a little bit, because you sometimes can get ideas and instructions like that, but not that much perhaps. And the thing was, it was a normal residential street. Like, there was nothing unusual about it except one thing, which sort of was the cherry on the cake. And there was, the only thing of note was this sign, and the word, as you'll see, is Sereno. And I saw it, and I stopped the car, and I just started laughing, and I had a shower of energy that just continued and continued and continued. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. What's going on? If someone saw me there, I'm just sitting in the car laughing and giggling to myself. And other people just go, this guy is like a little bit unbalanced, like he's not well. And so that was the situation. And interestingly, the name of that street is New Street, right? So new things, new stuff, which is something I like, and hence perhaps that's one reason why I like Conscientiology so much, because neophilia, new experiences, and so on. So Sereno. And as I said, a really long, energetic shower. And I have to admit, because I was laughing and extremely happy, there was euphoria involved as well. And I started to try to understand, well, what does all this mean, Here's another picture of the building. So it's on a different street. It's on a corner. And this is the main entrance to the building. It's just a series of apartments, sort of townhouses, apartments there. And it's, as you see, Sereno. And of note is this other street is Cyprus Street, and I'll mention that later on when we start talking about some theories and stuff. So Cyprus being, the country in the Mediterranean near Greek, and so on, near Greece, I should say. So here's on the other side of the road, where I just turned down. Here's on the other side of the road is like this beautiful view out to the ocean, and it just reminded me of that ortho pensato when we're talking about the sky becomes the ocean. And on some days, really, the sky looks like this, exactly the same as the ocean. Here, the clouds and the colors are distinct. But some days on that seat, another day I was there, it just looked exactly the same. You couldn't tell where the ocean ended and where the sky started, kind of a thing. So I sat there, and I actually went in. There was an open house across the road. There was a real estate agent there selling a place, and I thought about buying it, but I thought that might just be a little bit impulsive. Just calm down and so on. And then I went back onto the main road and started heading towards the hotel again. And then after about 5 minutes, I saw this street sign. Now it's a little bit smaller here, but it's called Zephyr Street. So I was driving along, and there's heaps of streets, but then one I sort of just focused on and saw Zephyr. So I was like, okay. So Serenissimus, Zephyr, and what's going to come? What's next? I started to think, well, okay, this is something else. And then just after that, there's a park, like immediately after, and it's called Apex Park. So Apex is a non-profit organization here in Cognopolis, and it deals with the existential program. Now, Apex in Queensland and Australia, it's not unusual to see this in parks and public spaces, because Apex is a non-profit organization that works with community kind of based things, which is pretty cool. And anyway, so like within 5 minutes of each other, in a small little town in Australia, all these things happen, and I was just going, okay, this is something. Like, here's the message, can you interpret the message? And that's the challenge that I've been trying to work on and continue trying to work on for a few years. So that was those things. So 3 terms that for conscientiology, you know, have important meanings and significance in a very small area. I also did actually look and research on maps in Australia through via Google Maps. Obviously didn't do this manually. How many street names or how many other places were called Sereno in Australia, and also how many street names have Serenity or Serene or something like this as well. And there's not a lot. So, you know, finding all these things, and Zephyr, I counted how many Zephyr streets or Zephyr roads are there in Australia, and there's something between 5 and 20 in all of Australia. I can't remember now, I didn't write down those facts. I don't have them to hand, but I did that research. There's not a lot, so it's not like it's a super common thing. And so, as I've been saying, didn't really know what to do with the information afterwards, how to interpret it more correctly, and what to do with it. And interestingly, you know, when I share these experiences or the principal experience with people, it's interesting. Depending on who I'm talking with, I can feel the energetic shower or not. And so this shows us that, what shows me that for some people, you know, you can talk about these things with. For other people, you can't. Like, there's a degree of openness, there's a degree of rapport that the person has, or there's a level of perhaps excessive criticism or pessimism or some form of pathophysiology within the individual I'm talking to at that moment that doesn't allow the energetic shower to happen. So this is just something that's interesting. And I've had various energetic showers presenting to you guys already today, right? So it's just one more confirmation. And even, was it a day or two ago, I was talking with a friend in Siayak here, just briefly. They're going to visit Harvey Bay. And she was just saying, yeah, we're going to go. And I started to get another energetic shower just with the slight mention of the region. So this is something which, it's a confirmatory kind of a thing that's accumulating over time. But I didn't share it, and my good friend Sergio there, who helped with the Portuguese translation of the slides, said, why haven't you talked about this before? Why? What's going on? And I didn't really know what to do with the experience, and I didn't know how people would react, and hence I was really quiet about it. And also I wanted to wait to try to verify it again. So I did a second trip to the location, and I did it with my partner Margali, my evolutionary duo, and with a couple of friends, Leonardo, Andrea. And I was in part seeking to share the thing with them as well. I'd already spoken to them about it, but I also wanted to verify a little bit if it was, you know, let me test again. And that night, we spent one night in the location, and I had 7 lucid out-of-body experiences during the night. And that's a high number for me, and that doesn't happen a lot. And so for me, it was another kind of indication that, yeah, there really is something here. There is a Serenissimus in this region, and there's some rapport and there's a connection that you're able to do in this instance. So I really like the region. I'm a real fan of the place. There's all sorts of ideas we can talk about later. What can we do with that? You know, I have a crazy idea. I'm not sure it's a good idea, but like to create like a serenarium in the region, so that laboratory where people go for 3 days and have an immersion experience. So you're building a serenarium in the region where you're confident there's a Serenissimus. I'm kind of curious as to the effect that would have in terms of even amplifying more the work which we achieve in the serenariums. So, and part of the second trip, we stayed in a hotel. It was a Mantra hotel. And the key cards they have for the rooms all have this phrase on them: I will unlock my potential, which I thought was pretty cool and pretty nice, and very much in line with the whole idea of serenology. So yep, those are my hands and those are my fingernails, yes. So we were there. And also, funnily, in this small town, when I was looking for on Google Maps doing that research to try to see if this is common or not and so on. In Harvey Bay, and I didn't know this until a few months ago, there's a street called Serene Way and another street called Tranquil Drive. So I'm like going, oh yeah, okay. So I'm these days now I can talk pretty openly about this. Like I'm more and more confident that, really, and there's no other place I found in Australia that has these street names and together like this and stuff. That so it's another indication. Okay, let's take it in this way. So now, guys, I want to I've got some questions and I've got some kind of a research methodology, but it's something very initial, and it's something which we really can work on to develop more and more. And any thoughts you guys have and comments, really please do feel free to share that. Hi, someone wants to speak. No? So anyway, I'll keep going on and see how we go. So questions I had: why is the Serenissimi in that region? And I give some rough answers to these later on. I'm presenting them here to share with you guys. So, what are his or her priorities? And is it a him or a her? And we know it doesn't really matter in terms of consciousness, but be good to know. What are his or her priorities? How can we research Serenissimi? And again, I'd like to hear your ideas. A methodology we could look at: attributes of the region. We can start to study the attributes of the region, the lifestyle of the place, the languages spoken, the energies, the holothoscenes. And this is an idea, the assistential proximity, because based on other experiences we had in Africa, I can see that we are physically, actually, at least at our level, maybe it's for a Serenissimus, it's not like that, but at our level, it allows us to engage in certain assistential processes in the maxi mechanism that it's harder for us to do from a distance. So I spent about 4.5 months in Africa, and a certain assistential process or assistential processes were happening there. Ectoplasm was being donated, coming out of me for hours, at least every second day, sometimes every day, for hours, just going. I didn't know to where or to what, but it was going. I came back to Brazil, and the ectoplasm was still going at first, for days, for the first couple of weeks, and then it started to decline and be less and less frequent. But if I thought about Africa and connected really well, the ectoplasm would automatically start again. So what was happening automatically in Africa when I got back to Brazil happened automatically for a bit, but then started to diminish, and eventually I returned to my baseline kind of process of exteriorizing ectoplasm and energies. And months later, I had an explanation or an intuition as to what one of the processes I was engaged with in Africa. And I was in South Africa, but this thing was happening in Nigeria, and it was based, I was reading an article in the BBC, and this is in articles that I've written and published here. And the idea came, you helped with this. And I was like, got nothing to do with me, like, and then the helper came with the idea again, no, you helped with this, all of that energy. And I was going, oh, okay. And it was a process of transition, a peaceful transition of power in Nigeria from a guy called Goodluck Jonathan, I believe his name was, who was the president or prime minister, to the new guy who is still in power there, who's Buhari. And it was like the article was saying, this never happens in Africa. This is great. This is really positive for Africa, da-da-da-da-da. And then this idea came that you helped with that I helped with that process. And I was like going, I know nothing. It has nothing to do with me. And the concierge insisted. So this idea of assistential proximity, you're there for a reason, and you're engaged with assistential works in that region. And that can be to do with reurbanization, which I know many of us are engaged with in some way, and so on. Another thing we can look at is the geopolitical context and the personal history of the Serenissimus with that region. Like why, again, coming back to why that region. So guys, there's some ideas here, but I really do want to hear from you, and I'm going to check the time we have here. And you're very welcome to share. I know I've talked a lot for the last 40 minutes. Is there any questions anyone would like to make?
Hi, Jeffrey.
Hey,
Very good presentation. One thing that comes to my mind is your personal relationship with all this scenario, all of this experience, and also about epicentrism becoming or acting or functioning as an epicenter. Is there some aspect of that notion you would like to share?
Yeah, my personal relationship with the region, and actually I was actually in this region when I was 15 years old. My high school did a rugby trip to Brisbane, and luckily I had broken my arm, but it had healed enough for me to go on this trip, and so I have actually been in Hervey Bay when I was a young kid, or in a place very close to it, like half an hour down the road. And we actually went out onto that island, the Fraser Island, as well. So I have a degree of a personal relationship with it, a personal relationship with the Serenissimus. That's a question I have for myself as well, like how do I know the Serenissimus, from where, from what, and so on. And it may be back from Greek times, and I'll mention that in a little bit. And to do with the cause of like epicentrism, I think we all need to assume our own epicentrism. And it's something I think I've been trying to do, and in various tasks in conscientiology, I've taken that challenge and lead in certain ways, not obviously in many cases in a visible way, and I'm not a consciential epicenter. I have that role of being like a bioenergy teacher and so on. But I consider myself an epicenter in various ways. And I think the work and the fact that these kinds of experiences that I had in Africa and I've had in Australia, I'm able to have those experiences, I think shows a degree of growth and development on my behalf in relation to being more mature and dealing with multidimensionality in a way which is relatively mature. I don't think I'm anything special, but I know I'm unique because there's only one of us each as a consciousness in the universe, right? So we're unique. But what I think is that I'm pretty good at being horizontal and sharing these experiences with people. And I think that's what I really would want to stimulate in relation to your epicentrism question, is that I think we all should be consciential epicenters, and this is a challenge I think we should all assume for ourselves and do the best we can with who we are at this moment, what the evolutionary conquests we have. I think I'll leave it at there for now, my friend. Is that okay? Anything else? Is there any other questions anyone would like to mention?
Well, what is the strong trait of yours that allow it to establish such a tranquil, such an easy rapport with the Serenissimus there? Would it be confidence, self-confidence?
I think I'm becoming more self-confident, but it's not something I've had a lot of for much of my life. I still feel sometimes like an imposter, like when I was younger, a lot of guilt and stuff. So self-confidence I had a lot of self-esteem issues. I don't really have those issues anymore. So I don't think they're a strong trait. I think there are weak traits that I've overcome. Perhaps something more along the lines of like the idea related to horizontality and equality. And I've always had the idea, if one can do it, anyone can do it. So I sort of de-dramatize things in some way. I think I'm pretty sincere and transparent with things. You know, I don't lie. I'm not a particularly political person. I don't try to manipulate and create and make it all about me, even though we're doing some really important work with Isaac and in various other fronts. You know, it's like some people do one project or one event and they appear a lot and they're like a star. They've done one thing. You know, like in Isaac, we do like 25 things and maybe one or two of them appear. And the rest of the time, other people are taking lots of the credit. And so it's kind of like, you know, the approach we have and the approach I have, it's, you know, I don't need a lot of personal recognition. And so I think that's probably one thing. Because imagine if someone else who didn't have that tendency had this kind of experience, they could make a bit more of a mess of it. They could perhaps become more famous in conscientiology circles than I am using it, but I'm not sure that's the healthiest way to go about it, you know, and to use this kind of experience. So I guess a bit of de-dramatization, but a good humor. I'm still very good at laughing at myself, and I think I have a reasonable degree of self-analysis and self-confrontation to help in the process as well, you know, like I don't see things as it being about me. You know, we're just trying to be a mini piece. I'm trying to be a mini piece to do the work I can. And that's something I said to Helpers many years ago in the first ECP2 I did. I said, I'll do what I can. That's just what I'm trying to do. You know?
Excellent answer. Thank you.
Please tell us more about that geopolitical context.
Yeah. I think in some instances it's, you know, and it's also a para geopolitical context, I suppose, isn't it, as well? I think maybe on the next slide I have an idea. Here's I put some answers to the question there. So physically it's in Australia. It's connected with Oceania in terms of structure on the world's stage. And there's lots of small islands in that area, like lots of small islands that are at risk from sea levels rising, and also have very different types of cultures. And this is something which you can see particularly in this third hyphen point here, Papua New Guinea, Timor-Leste, Indonesia. Some of those countries have cultures that over the last 100 years have been the richest source for sociologists to understand certain attributes of humanity. And they're all in that area, around that kind of area geographically. And so you have really different cultures existing there, and obviously it's very close and connected to Asia. If you look at the world, you've got New Zealand and Australia and a few smaller islands down in the bottom of the world, at the end of the world, speaking English. And then you've got Asia with the billions and billions of consciousnesses intraphysically there. And why is these two English areas, why are they down there? You know, it could be all sorts of other cultures, things could be there, but they're not. It's what's happened over the last 100, 200, 300 years is that it was colonized by English speakers and so on. And so it's just an interesting positioning of the pieces in terms of on the planet. And also all the Pacific Island, the Pacific Ocean's right there, like you're looking out into the Pacific Ocean. And that had all these major colonizations, which helped in terms of the internationalization of the world. You know, the French, the British, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, German, and USA all have places, territories there in the Pacific Ocean. So it's kind of, and the Pacific Ocean itself being the largest ocean on the planet, right? The greatest body of water we have. And so there's these factors. I'd like to hear your point of view, Marcelo. Do you have anything that comes to mind in relation to the geopolitical situation there? And I suppose just the last point here, this one on this page, historic and isolated cultures and lifestyles, such as Aboriginal peoples in Australia, which have the longest continuous civilization on the planet. So the estimates range between 45,000 to 60,000 years of continuous civilization. So if we talk about Holocene and traditions and ways of managing life, they've managed to survive and exist continuously, maintaining their culture and their traditions for that period of time, which on this planet is incredible. But also we can think in terms of reurbanization of that, there's a really good challenge. It's not a small thing. So there's a few ideas. If there's any other ideas or and so on, feel free. Any other feedback or questions from anyone?
Yeah, I would have a question. Jeff, hi.
Hi, Regina.
Regina here. I would be interested, and I'm pretty sure that you also study the history there, because I have the idea that the Serenissimus is there where he is needed or she is needed most. So I was wondering what was the history of this area, and if you can do any, I don't know, associations on that?
Yeah. So historically, it's always been a really small settlement, but they did do a lot of exports from there. So there was a lot of exports of wood and timber and other sort of agricultural products that went out through there. That jetty, that wharf that I showed, that's like 600 meters long, which is really long. It used to be twice as long. It used to be over a kilometer long. You're walking out into the ocean. And historically, before that, I did try to do some reading on it, but the research, and maybe this is something our friend Kim McCall in Australia can help with, the research in terms of the Aborigines, which I think is probably the more important facet of the reurbanization and the demand, the existential demand in the area. That's something that's really obscure and something very hard to detail. But perhaps it's a project that Kim would, because he does that kind of work there in Australia as an anthropologist, would be really a great person to help in that regard. Historically, that region, you know, there's lots of farming communities, at least from the English settlers' points of view, lots of farming communities. Nowadays, it's much more of a place people go to retire. People in Brisbane and other places, they want to go there to retire because it's calm, it's tranquil, it's peaceful, and there's not a lot of noise and other stuff going on. It's just a nice, relaxing place. An interesting thing in that region, and a little bit more to the north, Australia actually had slavery, and one of the major regions where that happened was up in the north and part of Australia on that coastal kind of area. So slaves from Aborigines and from the Pacific Islands were taken there. And so it's just another thing in terms of urbanization or, you know, holokarma that exists in that region. I tend to think perhaps the major point of this Serenissimus and why they'll be there is perhaps because of the Great Barrier Reef. So the Great Barrier Reef is the largest living thing on the planet. Right? It's a 2,300 kilometer long ecosystem, incredibly interlinked, interconnected, dependencies on each other and so on. And my hunch is that it's more to do with that and the Aborigines than it is necessarily other issues. Yeah, but any inspirations or ideas that you have, I'll be interested to hear.
And now I was just going quickly over the Wikipedia page in order to have an idea, and there I saw that at one point the amount of people, how can I say, the inhabitants, the number increased a lot. So if I am right, this is also an indicator for reurbanization, right? If the amount of people there kind of explode. I don't know if you can say really it's an explosion, but at least they said it increased. And of course, there's this topic of colonialization you were talking about. So I thought maybe there was a connection to this, I don't know, at least a kind of reurbanization process with all the, how can I say, the
consciousnesses there in that region.
Yeah, the things that happened during the time of the colonization, and as you said, the Aborigines, of course, they were not treated very well at the time. So
yeah, and to a large degree, they're not treated very well still.
Process.
And actually, one thing on that, this whole region, and it's called Southeast Queensland, right? And you've got the Gold Coast, you've got the Sunshine Coast, and you've got the Fraser Coast. And so Hervey Bay's in the Fraser Coast, but they're all pretty close. That entire region, which is quite a reasonable sized region, it's about 5 hours, say 6 hours from top to bottom. It's kind of like the Florida of Australia. So the numbers of the population increase in that area, in that region, has been really big. A lot of it isn't from new people being born, it's from people moving from other states in Australia to that area. So the population boom really has happened in that region. A lot of it is down to this migration from different states and regions in Australia to there. But it's a real growth area. Hervey Bay, not so much because it's a little bit too far north, but the Sunshine Coast is huge, becoming bigger and bigger, more populated, and the Gold Coast is massive. Now, there's a question, I think, from Grace. Margalee's going to read me the question. I'm going to try and see. Chat. Grace, really interesting. Oh, okay. Great. And she talked to Grace, you're talking about relocating. Good idea. So sorry guys, I'm looking here. You'll be seeing what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Grace. You're talking about your inspiration to move to Australia, and you had an expansion of consciousness called a God conscious experience in Australia on the East Coast. And it could be there's an interesting thing that's happened on the East Coast in Australia, up around Brisbane. We've had people kind of just happening to be living in that area. There's a volunteer of Isaac in that area, Silvana, and there's been Juliana Nicolau and Igor Cabral lived there for a while. Igor's still working for a company in that region, but they lived in Brisbane, and now they left, and Tony Muskoff and Tatiana Mota moved to Brisbane, which is the major city close to the area. So there's been like a relay of people in that area, and some very nice experiences happening. Igor actually discovered a tumor when he was there, and it was really lucky he went there and was treated by those people and those hospitals and stuff. He wouldn't have had discovered that, most likely, at least not at that stage, if he was still here in Brazil. So there's been lots of nice synchronicities and things happening in that area. And so, Grace, thanks for sharing there, your experience there. And that's the geopolitical part. Australia is also somehow isolated from the rest of the world and can play a role to work on the evolution here in an easier way. Yeah. Exactly, Grace. Like, we need pockets of more evolved things to help other people get the idea, right? And so that's perhaps something we can do there. And I'm just going to do the end of it. You can, or if...
She spoke about the Aboriginal. I was here thinking about the Aboriginal group. So I was thinking about the region as a Serenissimus. There is a Serenissimus in this area. That Serenissimus is also influencing, the spirituality of people from New Zealand, Aboriginal culture that has lots of spirituality.
Could be, yeah, and like that. And we went to a small city up in nearby, a couple of hours away from Harvey Bay. That's very alternative. It's up in the mountains. It's called Maleni, and very alternative, right? New age, lots of yoga and all that stuff. And I do Pilates, so I'm all in favor of stretching and all that kind of thing. But and then also just to the south further, there's also a place called Byron Bay, which was a real spiritual kind of a place, and so on. And so I think, that we see how the Serenissimus does influence the Holothoscenes, and not just in that town, but obviously perhaps over a wider area as well.
Yeah, I remember when we were there that some people told us about that people comes there because the energy that there was around in that park, in that place. So
yep.
People come to Harvey Bay because the energy, and it's totally different from the other side of the Golden Coast,
the Sunshine Coast, where we went to Noosa and those places, Mooloolaba.
Yeah,
it's much more, and I'm sorry to use the word, but it's much more tranquil. It's much more serene, much more peaceful. The other places are really nice too.
And also, I remember we went to a city, and I think Maleni, and they were there talking, having meetings about the spirituality.
Yep.
These things. So,
yep.
It's interesting.
Exactly. So just the last few slides I had here are ideas, and then we can just continue debating and discussing various things. It's only polite to give a name to someone, and I haven't met this consciousness, assuming again, but as I assume there's a Serenissimus there. I don't think I've met them in person, and I haven't shaken their hand and said, hi, nice to meet you. Can you spare some time to have a chat? I've given them the name, and I've given the nickname Coralis, and principally because of the connection with the coral reef, and just trying to get a sense of the Holothoscene more and so on. And I reflected on it for a while and tried to come up with some things. I did also think about Oceanus or something connected like that, but that's already been used in Greek mythology. But it was interesting when I was thinking about this consciousness and trying to come up with what nickname or name can we assign to this particular one. What's the major Holothoscene? I ended up settling on this, and I'll stick with that until he or she tells me, no, please call me something. But came to mind in the site, this Oceanus, which is a god from Greek mythology, with a link there. And maybe this consciousness has something to do with this other consciousness in Greek mythology. And that's why I mentioned the Cypress Street. That, if you remember how it was, Sereno, and one of the entrances to the building is on Cypress Street. It made me connect with the Greek thing as well when I was looking here. So Josie's asking me to make a connection between the subject discussed and shamanism. So shamanism, it's a sort of quite ancient approach to dealing with healing, connecting with the non-physical, connecting more with nature, which, and when we look at a Serenissimus and their ability with immanent energies, i.e. immanent energies from nature, we can see that there's obviously some rapport, connection, affinity between the idea of Serenissimus, Serenology, and shamanism. But also I think we should note that things where there's lots of traditions and rituals, I don't think, my impression is that the Serenissimuses aren't such a fan of those kinds of things. My impression is that Serenissimus wants new things. They want new understandings. They want new experiences for people, while respecting everyone's evolutionary level. So they understand why there's traditions and rituals and sacrifices and all sorts of other things. But they don't, in my understanding, they're not the kinds of consciousnesses that reinforce the existence of those things. They understand they're naturally going to exist because of the evolutionary process, but you know, it's a different kind of kettle of fish, so to speak. But shamanism, I've always had an attraction to. You know, the connection with nature and energies and so on, I think is really important. Yeah, absolutely, Grace. Let's try and connect with the consciousness and see why have in this instance they becoming a little bit less anonymous. That's, I think, an important part of the message to try to understand. Why are they a little bit less anonymous now, and opening up in this way? And I think it's an invitation. You know, I think they want new things, new understandings, new comprehensions, and so on. So, and this was mostly, many of you perhaps are already very good travelers and well-traveled, but I wanted to, when I presented in Portuguese, I wanted to stimulate the idea of traveling. You know, like have an Isaac expedition, and or just a conscientiological tourism, so we can get rare opportunities. You know, like I wouldn't have had this opportunity if I didn't go there, right? Obvious. We can allow the maxi mechanism to show itself. If you go to places, you engage with your energies, you put your energy there, you make an effort, the maxi mechanism has a chance. If we sit in our little narrow cocoon doing our things again and again and again, routines, habituals, you could even call them rituals, just referring to the last question we were talking about, you start to limit things. So we you know, the Serenissimus, my understanding, they're all about personal growth, evolution, interassistance, and traveling can bring us these things. Comprehending cultures, understanding ourselves in a deeper way as well. Grace asked if I could share some messages about the OBEs that I had as part of the second trip. So I didn't write them down, but what I remember is they started off about tending to the group, right? Groups, bigger populations, bigger sets of people there being tended to, slightly more complicated situations, slightly more demanding in terms of things of interassistance. And then as the night progressed, the groups got refined and changed and smaller, and by the end of the night it was stuff just purely about me, for me, individual kinds of things. And so that was the general tendency. But the great level of details, and I'd driven about 4 hours that day and been around and stuff, and so I was a little bit tired anyway. And so just another fact which indicates that having that number of lucid out-of-body experiences was even more rare. Like if you're tired, my body's physically tired, it's harder to remember as well. So that was roughly the main key, the thing from groups to individuals, the flow. There was no key messages that I got that I'm able to recall and share on that regard, Grace. Any other questions, guys? I'll see what, oops, that's the last page. So it's really now over to you and to hear your thoughts, the questions, and so on. Perhaps if we go back to the idea where we talk about the questions or the methodology, perhaps there's some people have some other ideas that we can study, you would like to contribute. One thing I suppose I could share is during the first presentation I gave of this talk in English, I had a few people in the audience here physically. One was called Mira. I call her Mira. Her name's Mira Silgi. And she talked about the idea, she had the idea of Atlantis, right? Which I've never given a lot of weight to or never thought a lot about in terms of stuff. A little bit, like in South Africa, just north of Cape Town, there's a place called Atlanta or Atlantis. It's actually called Atlantis. So there's a town there. And then just by coincidence last night, friends and my wife, Margalie, said, let's go to the movies. We went to the movies and we they decided we were going to see Aquaman. So Aquaman, if you know, it's all about Atlantis. It's all about, there's even one of the main ladies in the thing is Mira. So I was watching this. The movie's kind of a bit silly. It's good entertainment, but it's, you know, it's not the greatest acting, and it's a little bit weak, but it's interesting. It's okay to go and watch a movie and enjoy. But there's lots of synchronicities about the theme, and I sort of laughed a little bit because I knew today I was going to be presenting this talk, and I don't know if it's something which we'll ever be able to confirm, but she said maybe there was something, you know, like the Earth, the sea level has risen and fallen a lot, and, you know, tectonic plates move and all that kind of stuff. Who knows if sometime in the past that region had something to do with an underwater city. I don't know. It's just an idea that I thought I'd share with you guys to see if any of you had contemplated that as well, and so on. So let me know. Okay, so Grace is sharing with us. You'll see on the chat that she had a dream when she was taken by a helper to Atlantis as well. And she has recollections of Neptune too, just sharing. And Sergio's sharing, one of the heroes from his childhood was named Atlan, right? Who was the original king of Atlantis. And the series in question is by Perry Roden. Yeah, you know, so any other observations or questions, guys? Inspirations you've had during the talk? Associated ideas? And then Grace is just observing here in relation to the visit she had to this community, to Atlantis or Neptune. The structure was circular in stone and it had street signs. Interesting to know if you could remember any of the words on the street signs. So, you know, thinking more on the Serenissimus and the process of reurbanization, this, and also developing our own level of serenity, right? These are, I guess, other challenges that we can take. And do you guys have any other suggestions to include in this methodology? And perhaps this is something we can develop more, you know, and maybe even jointly try to produce a methodology to study Serenism. Any thoughts in this particular aspect?
I have a question.
Yeah, Christoph.
Would it be possible for you or someone else to contact the Serenissimus by, I don't know, telepathy or so, and simply ask for further information, or is that always declined? Such requests?
Yeah, you're a bold man. maybe because of my lack of self-esteem, I haven't really contemplated doing that too much. But and I tend to leave it to other things to happen. But I think you're right. I think, you know, like I think we need to progress in that way. I said, for example, this morning, I woke up and I felt a much stronger connection with the Serenissimus. There was a real sense of obviously the tranquility and the serenity, but also there was a kind of a dialogue, but it wasn't a dialogue where, like, you know, one word, another word. Like I had questions and I put questions and I was it was more like trying to capture the holothoscenes and capture the comprehension of the consciousness. Like what I had this morning was an overview of consciential evolution. Like I had none of this need to think bad about anyone, which is another instance I can share of a connection with the Serenissimus, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But what I had was this comprehension, and it was sort of like a bit of an explanation as to why you don't have to think bad about anything or anyone. If you take a broad enough overview of the evolutionary process and your development as a consciousness, and of everyone, we've all gone through the same process, from like a mineral in a rock to a plant, to subhuman animals, to human animals, and to where we are now, you understand that all of this stuff, all of the complications, the negative stuff, the pathological stuff, is just natural. It's just an inherent part of the process. And therefore, you just really don't need to sweat it. Like, there's no point holding a grudge because it's inevitable, it's natural. Why are you going to hold a grudge against nature? You know, it's like holding a grudge because the wave comes onto the shore. It's crazy. So that was a kind of cosmovision view of things that I had this morning that helped me understand how not to think bad about other people, or why you don't need to think bad about other people. And I did try to elaborate a little bit more, particular questions, but I didn't get like a clear response. Sometimes you can have a clear idea, a clear telepathic conversation, but not so, not in this case. But, you know, I want to go back to the region, and I want to do these talks more and study Serenology more, because connecting with the Holothosene is really liberating. It's really positive. And so maybe in the future, those things, you know, we'll be able to get some more ideas in that regard. I'm a little bit tainted by my history in conscientiology, and it seems, you know, you get a few things for free and then you just have to sweat and work a lot. You know, and I stopped getting free things a long time ago. And so maybe even this experience isn't free. Maybe it's just I only got them because I've worked so many years and so many thousands of hours in volunteering tasks for other organizations and for other things and so on, that maybe that's why I had these experiences. But I think it's not so much like that. I think they really are starting to open up more. So I will make a note to self, try to have more telepathic conversations with Serenissimus. And you should too, man. Why not?
I give it a try, yes.
Yeah, and any luck? Anything? Keep trying. Keep trying. And I think I can share one thing that happened here in Siak. So you know the Tertularium, the big round building. And if you come for International Week this year, which is in August from 16 to 25, when all the activities are going to be in English, we can go into this building and, you know, share the environment and talk and have debates there. But in the Tertularium, and this is when Dr. Vera was still alive, he had, at some times, there was Serenissimuses would come when he was there talking about some theme. And he would say, oh, okay, Serenissimus is here. And then he'll put his hand out and he would say, feel the energy, you know, and he's exteriorizing the energy of the Serenissimus. And one day I was there and I connected really well with the Holothosene, with the Serenissimus. And I was in, like, for 5 or 10 minutes, I had this state of peace, of calm, serenity, obviously. And I had no need to think bad about anyone. There was just no need. Things were just good. And you may think that doesn't seem realistic because the world has got bad stuff and this and that, but this is to help us understand the solidity and the homeostasis, the level of health and balance of the Holothosene of the Serenissimus. And so they have this imperturbable thing. It's incredible. It's wonderful. And so this is the kind of Holothosene we need to try to connect more with, right? And that's the challenge. Yeah, Regina makes a good observation. Isn't working with the consentiogram methodology, strictly speaking, per se, to study Serenissimi? It is. But also, you know, you've got to try to, you can read like the last items on each evaluation sheet, and that gives you a really good synthesis of the Serenissimus in relation to that evaluation sheet. But still, you know, meeting in person, connecting, talking, having these types of experiences, I think, is other ways to get a less theoretical and a more direct experience. And thanks for joining us, Regina. I see you have to go. but we'll have the full video online soon. And there's a question from Grace. Was Jesus a Serenissimus? Everything indicates that he wasn't. He seems to have a good degree of parapsychism, and there's a good experiment that Dr. Vera wrote on. He wrote a fair bit about Jesus, the consciousness who was Jesus, and has some really good criticisms, observations from what are generally accepted as facts of the life of that consciousness. Well, it's very hard from that epoch to know facts, but based on certain stories and accounts, you try to put together what you can. But he was a consciousness that Dr. Vera gave a hard time to in his works, and it seems with a degree of validity. I did hear Dr. Vera saying that nowadays the consciousness that was Jesus is an evolutionologist. Okay, I don't have that personal experience. I can't say that that's a fact, but that's one thing I have heard. And so it seems he might be getting up to that point. But a couple of thousand years ago, Serenissimus, based on the immaturities you can see manifesting in the consciousness in certain instances, the aggressiveness in some ways, I know, like he was anti-money and he didn't have the greatest relationship with women and various other things like this. You can there's a lot of observations you can make. The sense of all of this, Grace, regardless of who it is we're talking about, is to maintain our sense of criticism and our sense of disbelief. So the church has been exceptionally good at building traditions and beliefs in certain lines and trying to reinforce certain ideas in people's minds over a long period of time. We've all been exposed to that. We've all probably been part of it to greater or lesser degrees. So the challenge is to see, maintain our sense of criticism and look for facts and then try to judge them impartially. And so you can do the conscientiogram. You can apply the conscientiogram, which is available from Amazon, and you can download a free PDF as well. You can apply those 2,000 questions or items to any historical consciousness and see how they evaluate. And so we have to try to increase our level of objectivity in that regard, right? That's the challenge, is to be more objective in relation to ourselves and in relation to others. And to see, okay, what do we consider that consciousness as being in terms of having as an evolutionary level? The consciousness you referred to had a good parapsychism, had a pretty good control of energies, right? But had a lot of psychosomatic issues, emotional issues. So it would give us the idea that perhaps it wasn't Serenissimus at that particular time. But you take it, you think what you want to think, and I'm not telling you what the truth is. I'm just trying to give you some perspectives, okay? So, cool. What other ideas would anyone like to share or questions to ask? Anyone out there? No, all's quiet. So let's start to. Oh, Grace, good question. You've got good questions out there in Australia. Is there an updated list of other Serenissimi in the world? And which parts of the world are they in? Good question. The best site that you'll have a chance of is an icge.org.br. They've got a thing called like the para-elincologia, which is like the para-cast. They have some things there. A list of Serenissimi, I think the biggest one we have is in 700 Experiments. But an updated one, no, that's a good thing to actually, for us to work on. It's a good thing. We'll do that. Thanks for the idea. Yeah, it's you might want to send the full link if you can, Sergio. ICG, that's the one. That's it. So we'll come to the end of the bridge. Let's do a quick little energy work, even though to do a de-assimilation, even though, you know, don't really want to de-assimilate particularly from a Serenissimus, but we can do that as we like, and who knows, maybe we've provoked a few other things that we should perhaps de-assimilate from. So unless there's any other questions, guys, we'll start the energy work. We'll give you a few seconds to type or ask any other question. Otherwise, we'll do a little bit of energy work, and that'll be us for the day. Okay. Grace, really great to have you online from Australia. I know it's the middle of the night, so congratulations and good effort. Impressive. So let's do our energy work. So relax and take a couple of deeper breaths. Maintain the best connection you can with the most evolved consciousnesses you can. If you've connected with a Serenissimus, try to maintain it, but install your vibrational state. So use your attention, your concentration, your willpower to move your energies from the top of your head down to below your feet and circulate your energies. Circulate your energies and accelerate the movement of your energies inside and around yourself. Continually try to expand your perceptions of your energies. Intensify and expand your vibrational state. Start to exteriorize energy through your nuchal chakra in the back of your neck and through your umbilical chakra in the stomach, intestine region. Okay. Quickly install one more vibrational state. Okay, guys, diminish the vibrational state, start to return, taking full control of your physical body again. Everyone okay? All good? So I just want to thank you very much, Isaac, the bridge, and all the partners. I want to thank you for your participation. Thank you for the questions and making it a real pleasure to share this all with you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Rosalina from United States. Thanks a lot. I'm just beginner, so I prefer listen to you to learn more about conscientiology in English. So thanks a lot, helped me a lot. Very good, thank you.
That's great. All the best for you there. And all the best for everyone. Any other comments, farewells? All the best for all of you guys. And until next time, there's going to be new bridges starting in the new year. This is the last one for 2018, but we're the ball's rolling again. So there'll be more bridges coming up all through next year. Look forward to your participation and your input as researchers as well. Okay. That's it. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation, Jeff. Looking forward to seeing you all again in 2019. Okay.
Thanks, Andre, and your support on the bridge is great. Bye, everyone.